Hey dorks, King Dungeon Master here, getting ready for another session. I made a boo-boo in my last video. I said I had a session coming up on Saturday. Today's Saturday. The session is actually tomorrow. So, I leapfrog two campaigns, two homebrew, fully grown-up campaigns. When I do that, it's a little bit of a process of, okay, I'm done with Aquamara now for about a month. I can put those guys on the back shelf of my mind and start focusing on Thaldor. I explained Thaldor a little bit in the previous video. All you really need to know is this is fairly standard D&D fantasy, world rustic fantasy kind of level. Dominant political and cultural faction in the world is the Stillness, very, very oppressive, kind of a thing, trying to keep technology and civilization on a lower level because they don't want to attract the attention of gods and more powerful beings because that just never seems to wind up, good. Anyway, what today's video is really about is it is kind of more prep stuff. I think these videos are turning out to be more for dungeon masters than anything, and the topic that just seems to require just endless discussion and unpacking is preparation. How much is too much? How little is too little? And away you go. What I have been advocating for, what works for me, what works for you works for you. But if you want to try to do it the way I do it, and I'm going to modestly say I've had some success with this. My campaigns go well. My players really seem to enjoy them. So if you want to do what I do, here's how I do it. And it all comes down to this journaling thing. If you want to remember your lore, if you want to create a world that through your fluency of it, really, really feels to your players like, boy, have you ever got your hand on the wheel. Like there is a bunch of stuff, in this book that I've already, pre-written. This is established canon, and it is for you, dear players, to move through the world and explore it. That's what the players are looking for. They want that simulacrum. They want the world to feel real, which I know is a strange thing to say about a world that has dragons and wizards and fantasy elements, but that's actually really kind of the point. What you're trying to do is make a world that has dragons and wizards and magic feel like a real world. So here's my main idea for you today. Do less. Isn't that good news? Do less. What you can count on is that the human mind is a pattern finder and meaning maker. If we're talking about making this world feel real in the same way that our actual world feels real, what you need to understand is that our everyday perception of everything that's happening around us is really just a mental model. Just this thing that is constructed in our mind based on a shockingly small amount of data that comes in through our sensory organs, sight, taste, smell, all of that. And it pulls in a little bit here, a little bit there, and it constructs a model by painting in the in-between bits. The best example I can think of is a very simple one. You all know that you have a blind spot in your eye, right, where the optic nerve attaches to the back of the eye and carries that signal back to your occipital lobe. So the blind spot, at every minute of every day that you're looking around, there's actually, and you can test this out, just Google it later. I'm not going to waste time here doing it, but Google it later how to find your blind spot, and it's kind of a fun little experiment you can do, demonstrating for a fact that there is a spot right around here or so where there is no sensory information coming in, but your mind kind of knows what's supposed to be there, so it paints it in so you get this nice, smooth, complete picture of what the world is. You can do that with your campaigns as well. What I'm prepping up for here is a session tomorrow where my players they've come to the end of a big story arc. They have, at least temporarily, thwarted the plans of the Lich Queen, who is trying to build an undead army to take over the world. Fun stuff. And they've smashed up her conversion chambers. They've rescued the villagers that were going to become her army of the undead. Hooray, hurrah. Months had passed, and they'd all been invited to kind of a celebratory garden party that is serving a few different purposes. There has been a change of leadership in the Stillness, and even they are becoming a little more progressive. There are other factions in the world of Thaldor, representatives of which have been invited to this garden party as sort of an olive branch. Things have not been great between the Stillness and a group called the Scaled Remnants, who are a bunch of Dragonborn who used to belong to this, used to have a kingdom that was then kind of, pushed out to the fringes by, the Stillness itself. Who else have I got here? I've got representatives of the Forged Commune, who were kind of an underground, literally underground group of gnomes who were quietly working on forbidden technology out of the eyes of the Stillness. Well, representatives from them have been invited. There are mages from the Glomark Cabal. I've already got them. The players don't know this, but they're going to be deeply connected to the Unseelie Court of the Fae. So there's going to be some fun stuff happening there. There's Elder Tauros Halfhorn, who's a minotaur who belongs to a group of basically nomadic minotaurs who really have no kingdom and no interest in one. I gave them Russian accents for some reason. That just came out at the table last time. They're just... And this is to my point of, you can play with stereotypes a little bit. I know it's not nice and it's not particularly politically correct, but as a way of lightening the cognitive load on your players, because they won't remember much, you can rely on some stereotypes. I've used these examples before. Elves are snooty, dwarves are Scottish, and I guess in my world, minotaurs are drunken Russians, which is not very nice. I'm sorry, Russians, but you do have a bit of a reputation. So, sorry, the point I'm trying to make here is that much in the same way that your real mind makes a mental model from a pastiche of just little bits of sensory input, you can do that in your world by quite deliberately using stereotypes, so your players will instantly go like, oh, I've seen this before, I know how elves work. And then you can layer on a little bit of a twist, a little bit of a subversion of expectations, whatever it is. But start with what they will be familiar with, because your players ain't gonna remember much. Again, to connect this to how minds actually work, we don't remember much. My favorite line lately in that realm has been, memory is the residue of thought. We remember the things that we think about, so don't give them too much to think about. The session is opening tomorrow in a big, kind of a standard, war room meeting. The garden party was broken up when the Lich Queen herself, in disguise, showed up just to kind of see these heroes who really messed with her plans. And I think in her kind of arrogant sort of a way, wanted to see, wanted to walk amongst the glitterati of Thaldor, unnoticed and disguised, almost as just sort of a fun game for herself. Well, there was a little interaction with the parties, just like, I'll get you next time, kind of a scene. And she disappears through a portal. And now, all of these invited guests have been like, oh crap, well, it's a good thing you're all here. Let's retire to somewhere more private and we'll discuss what is to be done moving forward. So for me as the Dungeon Master, what it is just opening up the sandbox of Thaldor to these heroes who are now level 9, and are themselves approaching that kind of infamous, powerful super team of heroes. And what I'm doing for them is they're going to be introduced to a bunch of NPCs. Some of the names they've heard before, but tomorrow it's really going to matter. And here's what I'm going to try to do, and what I'm advising you to do as a Dungeon Master is be sparse with the details. I am absolutely guilty of this as a Dungeon Master, trying to load way too much description and detail onto each character, none of which they're going to remember. So, a name, their function in the world, they're the High Keeper of the Stillness. They are a representative of the Ashen Herd, those nomadic minotaurs. They are a gnome with the Forged Commune. That's it. And maybe, if it's meaningfully relevant, one little detail. So Elder Tauros half horn. I mean, A, Tauros for a Minotaur. Do that. Be stereotypical. Be a little bit punny. It makes the memory stickier. So Elder Tauros half horn. Well, it's right there in the name. The one physical. They know what a Minotaur looks like. You don't have to go over like everything that they're wearing. Fantasy is notorious for this. So you can see I've got the entire Wheel of Time series up there. I'm thinking of doing a reread. I've read it once. I'm thinking of doing a reread soon. I do enjoy it. It's a little hokey. She folded her arms beneath her breasts. But I'm probably going to do a reread of that. And rereads go a lot faster because, as in fantasy, if it's Tolkien, if it's George Martin, if it's Robert Jordan, they are notorious for describing every bit of embroidery on every dagged sleeve, slashed doublet, or whatever. And we all know that you can skim the hell out of that stuff. It doesn't matter. I don't know why they do it. I'm a fan, so I feel like I can make fun of them for it. But oh my goodness. At the table, where there are real stakes to your players remembering important things, don't give them things that aren't important to remember. This is from my teaching practice. This is pure cognitive load theory. That working memory is vanishingly small. It is such a bottleneck to long-term memory that you really have to respect and protect it. So one little physical detail per character, and I would recommend that it be a meaningful detail. If the arch druid of the Verdant Choir, is there. Well, I've already established that the Verdant Choir is split between sort of a peacenik kind of a group and a more military faction within it. So maybe the detail that I offer is that there is they have an ornate but very functional looking sword, conspicuously strapped on the outside of their cloak. Like that's it. A meaningful detail they can think about for a moment, and memory is the residue of thought. Okay, whatever they've got. All I have to, just one or two little details, and much like the blind spot in your eye, their minds will paint in the rest. And you might be thinking, like, what if they're not imagining what you're imagining? Or even the other players are imagining, and they each have a different picture of what's going on in their head. Let me tell you, there is no way to avoid that. That is going to happen, and it's okay. It's kind of delightful, actually, knowing that each of these players has probably a wildly different mental view of what your world looks like, the vibe, the flavor, even if you have described in some detail some aspects of it, and that's okay, because that once again, and this is where we'll finish today, if you are interested in making a fantasy world feel real, understand how we perceive our actual world, which is to say, we pick up a little detail here, a little detail there, and we paint in the rest with what we think ought to be there. And that is what you as a dungeon master should be doing as well. I'm going to drop them into a room full of NPCs. I know this is going to be heavy on their cognitive load already, so who they are, and these are pretty good note-taking players as well. They will take some notes. They'll have the names of these, but don't give them too many notes to take. Caliph of the Glowmark Cabal. Black cloak, deep hood that he doesn't remove even though the air in the room is warm and stuffy. That's it. That's it. Resist the temptation to describe more. And then from there, boy, like I'm a little nervous, but it's like a good kind of a nervous where it's like, okay, I know how this world works. I know it's available. I know that these guys as players love magic items. And, one of them is an artificer, and loves the technology and wants to their character to be able to do this, that, and the other thing. Hey, that's great. I have been doing this just long enough now, like 5-ish years, six years now, that I'm confident enough. Like I've had enough experience to know that every time now after dozens of sessions that I've had now over the last 6 years, dozens and dozens, that nervous as I am of like, oh no, what if I run out of material? What if they go in a direction I haven't planned for? If you have that deep bones knowledge of the basic history and basic structure of your world, improving out of that is not as hard as it sounds. So, and don't be afraid to ask for breaks either. So, end of a scene, they've decided they're going to go stomping off to wherever to talk to the guy. You haven't really planned for it very much. And you just say, like, okay, this is a great place to stop, bathroom break, get your snacks or whatever. You go into your little mind cave, put on some headphones or whatever, right. And then when they come back, okay, well, at least you've got a couple of NPC names and maybe, a quest hook, for the next scene. And you only have to do that a couple of times. And my goodness, and if there's a little bit of combat in there, that's definitely a 3-hour session and you are covered. So less is more. Your mind, their minds will paint in the bits in between, and you can count on that. You shouldn't provide all those in between little bits of like what kind of embroidery was on what kind of cloak or whatever. A name, their place in the world, and you can improv a little bit of personality. If you're the kind of DM that does the voices great, you can do third person as well, where like, the high keeper of the stillness, says to you, you can do it all third person, it explains to you the blah, 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 blah. And you don't have to RP, role play the entire thing. So there's all kinds of things you can do there. But the main lesson for today is resist the temptation to paint in the bits in between. It's going to overload your player's short-term memory. Not only that, but you're doing them a favor because you're allowing them to paint that stuff in, and in doing so, they will remember it. Memory is the residue of thought, so allow them to do that. I'm going to do a Thaldor session tomorrow. I'll have a debrief for you, probably midweek or something like that, depending on when I get a chance to record again. But thanks for your attention. This is a new channel that I haven't told anybody about. I'm doing this experiment where I'm just letting the algorithm do its thing and find my viewers. And it's finding me some viewers. Like the videos, I know it's not huge or anything, but they're getting anywhere from like, well, some of them are like 7 views. I think the last one like just cracked 41 or something, and that's not bad for having not foisting it on my friends to watch this. So thanks for giving me whatever attention you're giving me. I really do appreciate it. I hope you're finding something useful in these, and I genuinely hope to see you at the table. Later.